My estate agency story. Today, I'm joined by David Adams, who is an estate agent from the Northwest. His family are have been in the estate agency for generations, and he's here to tell his story about him becoming an estate agent. Thanks for joining me today, David.
Thank you, Chris.
Now, estate agency's in your blood, isn't it? I think it was your great grandfather that set up Beresford Adams. Is that right?
Beresford Adams, yeah, 1889.
Big estate agency in the Northwest, mate, are they?
Indeed, yeah, they really are.
Still going as well, aren't they?
They are. They're now owned by Countrywide. Yes, they're one of the biggest estate agency groups in the UK. And yeah,
And did your grandfather go into a state agency? And I know your father did. We'll get to your dad in a second.
yeah. So my great great grandfather actually, he was called Beresford Adams. He started Beresford Adams in 1889. His son, my great grandfather, Henry Dean Beresford Adams, was then an estate agent, and then my grandfather, Philip Beresford Adams, was an estate agent, and my dad, Julian Beresford Adams, and then me. So I'm fifth generation.
Fifth generation.
Yeah.
So you're probably one of the very few people that I know that probably wanted to be an estate agent when you were younger.
Technically not. I actually, I think because all my family were estate agents, my dad was an estate agent. I actually had a bit of resistance
Mhm.
against it. Actually, however, my dad got me a Saturday job at our estate agency firm called Cavendish, which he started off in 1993. And my first job was replenishing self-selection sales particulars, if anyone remembers those.
Do you have to put the stickers on as well?
Indeed, yes. So
Oh.
my first job,
How
believe
old
it or
were you
not.
in 93?
So I was 14 actually.
Okay.
14. So my first job was to go down to Jessop's, the camera people, and I'd pick up all the photographs, and I would come back and we'd Pritt stick the photographs to the front of the
So they
brochure.
weren't even self-adhesive.
No, no,
Wow.
yeah. And then we had, I think in our office then in Chester we had about 400 houses for sale. And my job on a Saturday morning, I had a little notepad and I used to go around every single display, see which ones needed replenishing, and then stick them in the rack.
What did you learn at that time, apart from Pritt stick and
Um,
the smell of Pritt stick, which again, if you know, is amazing as well.
it is, yeah. So actually, do you know what? One of the things I learned was that a lot of people back then, so it's in 2002, a lot of people back then just like to come into a estate agent just to have a browse, to be honest. And I think back then, because we had self-selection, people used to come in through the front door and they'd go to the far left-hand side of the office to where the sort of £30,000, £40,000 properties were, perhaps an auction property or an informal tender, and they'd pick up a couple of brochures from displays and carry on a little bit further, perhaps pick up a couple of £200,000 properties, all the way around to the back side, £500,000 properties, and maybe even pick up a couple of £1 million properties as well.
And this was in the 90s because,
Yeah,
what's a million then is now probably four or five now.
yeah. So these people would pick up, let's say, half a dozen brochures, all different price ranges, and they'd sort of go towards the door to leave and turn to us and say, "Thank you very much," and they just waltz on out the door. And back then, we didn't even stop them, to be honest. We just let them do that. It all seems crazy these days because we don't speak to anyone unless we've got their email address and their phone number these days, and we don't really print a lot either.
I mean, Chester's very touristy based. Do you think a lot of them were tourists?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I do remember a lot of people coming into the office and asking for directions, where the museum was, where the open top bus started from. Uh, so yeah, I think a lot of estate agents were treated like tourist information centres back then.
Okay, so you were working there on a Saturday. At least you weren't at McDonald's flipping burgers
No.
or newspaper rounds. Um, you eventually, when you got to 18, went to university, didn't you, to do estate agency, land management, estate management surveying? Is that the sort of
Yeah, so during the summer holidays when I was sort of 17, 18, I was doing some work experience with one of the surveyors from our business. So I used to go out with him on home buyer surveys. So I decided that I wanted to be a chartered surveyor.
Because that's how I got into this game.
Oh, is it? Right,
Mhm.
okay. So I went down to Bristol to UWE, and I
Was it
enrolled.
up until that time before you went out with the surveyor? Was property still off the books?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The properties were selling like hotcakes, and I think, to be honest, coming back to what you said before, that I didn't want to be an estate agent, but what made me change my mind is I would be filling up displays in the office on a Saturday, and I would be listening to the phone conversations that the negotiators were having, doing deals, selling houses, and actually thought, this is kind of cool. I'd quite like to do this.
Why?
Because it sounded fun. It sounded, if they were doing deals, it sounded, very rock and roll. And actually, I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So actually, maybe I did want to be an estate agent.
You thought it was cool, but you went out with the surveyors and thought, actually, there's a proper job here. I'll go out with them. So you went down to Bristol.
Yeah, so went down to Bristol and I enrolled on a real estate valuation and management course, which was an RICS accredited course.
So that's 3 years, or was it 4 years with a sandwich?
So it was 4 years with a sandwich.
Okay.
And to be very honest, after 6 months, I decided it wasn't for me. I missed being back home in Chester. I wanted to
Okay.
get back into estate agency.
What did your mum and dad say when you basically said, I'm pulling out?
I think at the time they weren't impressed. Actually, my dad in particular actually wasn't impressed.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I got one sister.
Was she involved with the business?
No, no.
So basically, you let the family legacy down, haven't you? At the time,
At the time,
it seemed that way, didn't it? Just to me.
it might have seemed that way at the time. Yeah, sure. But actually, what I decided, what I decided is that I actually wanted to be an estate agent. Now, my dad isn't a surveyor. My grandfather wasn't a surveyor. So actually, perhaps going to university and becoming a surveyor was actually deviating away from
The thing that
finding
made you
property.
realise that the thrill of the chase, doing the deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I wanted.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you got made straight. They'll give you a branch manager's job, silver tongue, silver spoon, in at the top.
I wish. No, I really had to fight for it, funnily enough. So I came back after dropping out of university, um, came back to Chester, and at the time there was a full-time job as a sales negotiator in our Chester office. Now, at the time, our sales manager was a gentleman called Max, and he interviewed me for the job. It wasn't my dad who was interviewing by any means.
Would have your dad interviewed that for that role?
No,
No.
no. No, Stephen would have never interviewed me anyway. And I think to prove a point, if I'm being honest, Max gave me an absolute grilling. No, I did get the job, and that's where I started as a sales negotiator back in 2007,
Just before the crash.
just before the crash. So I joined when properties were, selling overnight, house prices were rocketing, and then it all changed.
Can you remember the day when basically sales are falling through and nothing was selling?
Yes, not vividly, but I can
It was
remember.
over about a couple of weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I remember when house prices started to plummet, and actually, so our sales manager back then actually incentivized us as negotiators on price reductions. I know, which would seem crazy these days, I'm sure, but yeah, we were incentivized. We were given £10 for every price reduction that we would get. Now, back then we had 400 houses on the market, and probably the majority of those were now overpriced because house prices had fallen. So we hit the phones and we got saving them reduce, to get them sold.
Down by a quid, get your tenner. There you
Yeah,
go.
absolutely.
For the last 14, 15 years, we really haven't had many different conversations. Yes, we had COVID, but everyone was in the same boat.
Mm,
But at the end of the day, when you've got a stock of 400 and the market's doing that, it's very easy to follow the market down and still lose.
yeah,
You've got to almost get under the market.
yeah, no, right.
What did you learn?
I think I learned. I mean, having those difficult conversations with those sellers, quite a lot of them were now in negative equity. They taking big mortgages, 100% mortgages back then, and actually we were asking them to reduce their price below what their mortgage was, and yeah, they were very difficult conversations. So I got a lot of resilience, learned a lot of resilience from that, I would say.
What about empathy?
Empathy, yeah. I
Okay.
learned how to be empathetic with people.
I mean, just press pause a second. What did you learn from your father growing up, and what did you learn from your mother?
So my mum was a stay-at-home mum when we were younger, and yeah, she really cared for us, and really taught us a lot about caring. She did everything for us. So I think that's where I got my caring side from.
Okay. Your dad?
Dad, perhaps how to be courageous, how to face into fear and have difficult conversations with people.
I mean, you're MD of the firm now, and I know your dad's still involved with someone else, but you're the MD of the firm. Do you recognise the? And I know we're not there at the moment, but have you ever had a month where it's been squeaky bum time in terms of are we going to make enough to pay the wages this month? Because he'll have had it a million times worse.
Yeah. Now, to be honest, no, I've not actually had to have that conversation. We've not had that circumstance, to be honest. No, I've been there.
Very lucky.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been there plenty of times when that was the case for my dad. I remember back in, it would have been 2000 and 2009, where we had to make a load of people redundant.
Hmm.
We had to put members of the team on short time back then because things were really hard. Um, but no, I've never had to face that myself, luckily, yet.
And my advice to anyone watching this is that if you've got a boss or someone who you've worked with in the past who's been there, then please do find out what they went through because you have to prepare yourself for these things.
Mm,
We know
yeah,
none of us know. We're filming this in April 2025. None of us knows what's going to be happening in the market
no.
in the next 6, 12, 4 years, 10 years, whatever years.
Mm.
So you went into sales. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, no, I did. I did. I liked, as I said before, I loved chasing the deals. I love speaking to people. I love going out on viewings. I love agreeing sales.
Because you were in the sales department. Let's just have a look at the notes. You were in the sales department for 3 years, and then you went over to lettings.
Yeah, so I actually trained to be a trainee valuer in sales, and this was at a time
You
where,
remember your first free val?
yes,
We always remember our first, don't we?
absolutely, yeah, yeah, no, I do. I trained to be a trainee valuer, so I was a trainee valuer, which basically consisted of accompanying the valuer out on valuations, and then I would do the listing appointment, the take-on appointment with him. Well, I was going to be a valuer, but we were hitting hard times in the market, things were slowing down, and my role was going to be made redundant. So at the same time, lettings was on the up, and they were actually advertising for a lettings valuer. So I seized that opportunity and thought, but you know what? I want to be a valuer. Let's go and do lettings instead. Surely it's the same as sales.
Did they actually let you loose actually valuing in resi sales before you went across to
No, not on my own. No,
what was it like in lettings?
very different. And if I'm honest, I had a bit of a wake up call. I went over to lettings, thinking I could go out on the road straight away and be a valuer. And the reality was, I was an estate agent now in the lettings department. Very, very unusual place to be.
Yeah, we don't normally let estate agents anywhere near the lettings department because they're
No,
very good at doing deals, but they're not very good at doing all the legal work.
no, no. So that was me, to be honest. I was a headless chicken almost.
Okay. At the time, did you have any process in you? Or was it all people skills?
It was all people skills, to be very honest.
Okay.
So I very much, so my boss at the time, Christine, took me to one side, and I trained with her basically for the next year almost actually. So I trained with her on valuations, and she taught me everything I know in terms of compliance. So actually understanding landlords. Looking at all the legislation, and I really took a deep dive into that. So I actually became obsessed with learning knowledge about lettings compliance because I realized that as a young lettings valuer, because plenty of people in my town, they were 10, 15, 20 years older than me. So I was still very much the young man. So my tactic to win business was actually to wow them with compliance knowledge.
That's really difficult as a people person to start to love the process. Where did you find that love from? Was it always there? You just never knew it was there?
I would say that it wasn't always there. I had to, sort of force myself to do it almost.
Do you still have to force yourself to do it?
No, no. So I love learning now. I absolutely love learning.
Okay, interesting. That's not words that I would normally expect out of an estate agent's mouth.
No. So I
You're a strange one in a good way.
Yeah, thank you. So growing up, I wasn't a great learner. I didn't do particularly well in school, GCSEs, A levels. I scraped through them to be very honest. I didn't like doing my homework. Um, so I stumbled upon this whole new world. So take you
When
back.
was this?
So this was actually December 2021.
So let's just confirm. 2010, you went into lettings, and roughly 10 years later, you'd made your way up to being lettings director.
Yeah,
Just another lettings director, son of the father. But then you saw the light.
I did. I did. So I yeah.
What was the catalyst that turned you into writing stuff like this,
Yeah.
doing videos online, starting to become a bit of a thought leader in the industry?
Yeah. So it was actually COVID. I got COVID in December 2021.
Okay,
So
quite late on actually.
yeah. So although obviously I was an agent, I was out in the public. We were obviously using correct PPE, etc. We were meeting people, doing viewings, valuations, etc. when we were allowed, and I escaped it. And it hit me in December 2021. I got COVID. It had finally got me. And I'll be honest, I'm a very active person, both physically, mentally, always running around, doing all sorts of things. So to actually stop and not be able to do anything for a couple of weeks. Now this was back when we still had to isolate. So I got it just before Christmas. So Christmas was cancelled. Couldn't see any of the family, and I've actually never been that ill ever before or since.
So you put in the spare bedroom, were you?
Yeah,
And
pretty
food
much.
was put through.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually. So I remember actually. So I myself and my partner, we cooked Christmas dinner, and she put me in charge of making the sprouts. And I kept on putting more salt in because I was tasting it. I was going, these are very bland. I put a bit more salt, put a bit more pepper in, and she tastes them. She goes, "What on earth have you been doing?" And what I'd realised is I'd lost my taste as well. Um, so I'd got COVID. I was bedridden, and I had nothing to do. And I was in so much. I was so ill. I couldn't even watch Netflix. So I thought, "Do you know what? Why don't I start listening to some podcasts?" So the first podcast I listened to was a podcast called the High Performance Podcast, and they were interviewing a gentleman called James Timpson, who was the CEO of Timpson's the Shoemakers. And James Timpson was talking all about upside down management and how he incentivizes his middle management to make the shop workers as happy as possible and basically give them autonomy to do whatever they want. They can paint the shop pink, they can do deals, give stuff away for free, etc. And that really sparked something in me. And I thought, you know what, I want to become a leader. So I went down this whole rabbit hole of listening to other, podcasts of other CEOs, and then it was a few months later, my dad and I had a conversation. Now, we'd always joked that one day I would take over from him as the managing director. And he sat me down one day and he said, "It's about time you stepped up. How about it?"
What year was this?
So this was
22.
2022.
So how old were you at this point?
So I would have been 33.
33. How old's your dad at that time?
He would have been 67.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it a surprise he said those things?
Yes, yes, it was actually. I think I'd almost lived in a world where perhaps he'd always be
Always there.
in charge. Yeah, and always there. Yeah, it was a surprise actually.
Now, when you get a transition from father to son, the amount of stories I've heard where the father still puts his oar in, people still go to the old boss, bypassing you. Did you have any transitional problems?
No, to be honest, he actually pretty much from the get-go gave me his full support and just said, "Look, I trust you to get on with it." Um, one of one of the first things he said to me actually was, "No, we need to get you a pay rise." And my reaction to that wasn't what you would imagine. Most people would go, "Yeah, I'll have another 10 grand a year, let's say." Now my reaction was completely different. So I actually said, "I'd like to have a business coach." I had this person on my shoulder, basically my inner voice saying to me, "Who are you to be the MD of your company? You've never run a business before. You have no idea what you're doing." And the reality was I didn't.
Okay, I mean, most people have that voice, imposter syndrome,
Yeah,
but you did something about it.
I did.
Do you think you would have had though that? Do you think you'd have gone down that I want that business coach without the COVID and the?
No,
So the COVID was actually a gift for you, wasn't it?
correct. Yeah, it was. It was.
So who did you surround yourself with then in 22 to enable you to become the person you are today?
So my cousin, Mark, his name is. Now he about 10 years ago now, he was diagnosed with terminal lymphoblastic leukemia, and at one point actually given 6 months to live. Fast forward 10 years later, he's very much still with us, and he's got an incredible mindset, and he's actually a life coach and a business coach. Just by chance, we met for coffee in the March of 2022, just before this conversation with my dad happened, and we just had this amazing conversation. And when Dad and I had the conversation that I was going to take over as MD, I said to him that I'd really like to work with Mark, rather than pay me, a pay rise, becoming the boss. How about the company pay for me to be coached? Because then I think that the profit will come, and then the pay rise will happen one day. So we started working together, and God, there was a lot of work to do. And it wasn't business coaching to start off with. We needed to work on me before we worked on the business. So there was a lot of self development that needs to be done.
What was the biggest thing that your cousin changed in you?
So I would say belief.
Okay.
He taught me to believe in myself. I had
Did you
massive,
not believe before?
possibly not. No, I don't think I did. I had massive imposter syndrome, and he just helped me to believe that actually we can achieve anything we want if you have the right mindset.
A lot of people who don't that try and sort out their imposter syndrome sometimes can go the other way and become too confident and almost cocky.
Hmm.
What 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 holds you? What keeps you on the straight and narrow?
Um, I think just having a reality check every now and again, actually just sort of looking from a third party point of view at me.
Is he still coaching you?
No, no, he's not. He's not.
So is there anyone coaching you at the moment?
Not from a life coach point of view. We have so we're part of the Agent Rainmaker community. So I do a lot of work with Sally Lawson and Dawn Bennett. So from a business coaching point of view,
Very, very good.
they coach us and they're phenomenal. And then also there's a gentleman called Tosin Oganusi, who is a business coach stroke public speaking coach. So I actually work with him one on one as well.
I have listened to him at the at Sally's events.
Yeah, no, he's very good.
Yeah,
Very
very
good.
good. Very good.
So I actually met him through Sally, as you can imagine. So after being coached by Sally for about 6 months, we'd hit a milestone with Agent Rainmaker, and Sally actually texted me one day out of the blue and said, "Would you like to speak at ARX Mastery, which is a virtual conference that she does once a year? And I'll get Tosin to coach you how to public speak." Now, I'll be honest, I went white because public speaking was my biggest fear. So much so, I wouldn't even go to one of those networking events. The ones where you have to do a 30-second elevator
Yep.
pitch and say, "I'm David, I'm an estate agent." Wouldn't even go to that.
Because that's the killer one, public speaking and doing video.
Yeah,
So if I'd asked you to do a video at this point, you'd have said no as well.
not a chance, Chris. Not a chance.
So what did he teach you to get over your? I mean, and it's the same fear of public speaking and video. What did Tosin do to teach you that we can help the ladies and gentlemen watching this?
So he he said something to me. He said confidence comes from consistency, and he said you will feel uncomfortable when you first do it, but you've just got to keep on doing it, keep on doing it, keep on doing it, and the confidence will come. And it did. And to be honest, when Sally asked me to do this, I remember thinking, "There's no way in hell I can do this. I can't public speak." but a little voice said in me, said inside, this is the biggest opportunity you've got ever from a professional point of view and a personal growth point of view. So I seized it with both hands and said, absolutely, Sally, tell me what I need to do. So I started to work with Tosin one on one and then deliver that speech on stage. So I actually spoke for nearly 30 minutes completely, with no auto cue, any notes. And I loved it. I had a buzz, something lit up inside me.
How do you keep feeding that monster? Because that monster can take over your life. I'm on stage, the video bit, and I appreciate there's some an irony in there with me asking you that.
Do you mean from as in stop it from being
Becoming
control or
to almost
feeding the confidence?
no, that when you're confident enough to do it and carry on doing it. I see many people trying to keep pushing the boundaries, almost like a drug.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. So I've got to stop myself from
Yeah,
going, yeah, crazy, basically.
well, not necessarily crazy, but keeping that fine line between cockiness and confidence, and feeding the addiction of the
Yeah.
admiration of the people. How do you do that?
Um, Feedback, I would say.
Okay.
Feedback with the team, with my family and friends as well. That they.
What does your other half do for you in terms of keeping you on the straight and narrow?
So she's probably my biggest critic.
Good, we got there.
She's my biggest support,
Do you
but
know
my biggest
what's the
critic.
name of your partner?
Millie.
Millie. We
Millie.
got there in the end, babes. Don't you? God's sake. Should I put a board on for you next time?
Yeah.
Because that's what I have a Millie. Her name is Joanne,
Yeah.
and she recognises there's you have to be confident, but it's when that confidence turns to hubris and cockiness.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. She reins me in. Definitely.
What else does she do for you to make you the person you are?
Um. Well, she doesn't let me be, the personality, the landlord coach, the estate agent, the letting agent
Because
at home.
he's written this book here, and we're going to look at this in a separate video. You know, I mean, it's a good book.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good book. And you're doing lots of videos and you're on stage and stuff.
Indeed.
It's that fine balancing act, isn't it?
It is. And to be honest, when I'm at home, all that stops. And I'm a dad. I'm a dad, so I've got a young boy, George, who's 2.5 now, and I'm a dad and a partner.
Okay, so you're in your mid-30s now. If I get you back here in 10 years' time, what am I going to see? Because at the moment you are a 3-branch operation based in Chester and 2 satellite towns
Yeah.
of Chester. What does the future look like for you?
I would say if we had this conversation again in 10 years' time, I I would say we'd be a bigger agent. Perhaps not having more offices. I don't think that's the way forward necessarily. I think we'd have a bigger landlord portfolio. We'd be helping more people. And
I mean, are you happy at the moment?
yeah, no, I am. I am. We've got a good balance at the moment, but I think what we would like to do is do more lettings agent acquisitions.
Okay.
We did an acquisition 2 years ago, actually, where we bought one of our competitors, 100 properties under management.
Okay.
So we've really got an
I
appetite.
mean, how many properties do you have under management at the moment?
So we've got just over 600 now.
Okay, so that's a sizable sum.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you judge yourself on the size of your portfolio?
No,
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 but
because
then you want to be bigger. There's a paradox there.
yeah, yeah. Funny you say that. Maybe we do judge ourselves on the size of our portfolio. Yeah, maybe we do. I think uh, we would like to be bigger. So yeah, that would be wrong of me to say that we don't judge ourselves by how big our portfolio is.
Do you think that's a fair? Do you think that's a fair judgment of how well an estate agent or letting agents do is by the size of their portfolio?
No, I would say it's more about the impact you're making on the local community.
Oh,
So rather than numbers, the amount of properties that you list or you sell, or the size of the portfolio, I would say it's more about the impact. I think if let's say, but our big goal is if someone has got a property need in Chester or Mold or Riffin, where we operate, if the first agent on their lips is Cavendish, he said, oh, for that we need to use Cavendish. that's we've made it, I would say.
David, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.